Fires are often an overlooked catalyst for many of the changes that affect our modern world. You may have heard of the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire of 1911 and its effect on workplace safety regulations. Today, I will turn your attention to the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, the destruction of 17,000 buildings that led to the significantly stronger building codes that affect the very places you live and work in to this day. Here's some backstory. In 1871, the city of Chicago was a thriving city of approximately 324,000 people. As you can see in this image of Chicago before the disaster, the city was densely packed with wooden structures, a detail that would prove catastrophic. However, little did the residents of this American city know what was coming later that year. In the 3 months leading up to the early October day, the city was in an extreme drought. Only 3.5 inches of rain had fell, which was a quarter of the average foot of rain or so that would normally fall during the late summer and early fall. It was the second driest early July through early October period in the city's history. It was also an extremely breezy time. Winds in the preceding weeks were reaching 15 to 25 miles per hour at times. A low pressure system moving across the Great Plains in the days leading up to the fire would intensify these winds. The day before the fire, winds out of the southwest of 35 to 45 miles per hour were reported. A fire that ignites in wind speeds like that finds it extraordinarily easy to spread rapidly. On October 8th, 1871 at 8:30 p.m., a small barn fire would ignite in a Chicago neighborhood. This is the actual site where it all began, a humble structure that would spark one of America's most devastating urban disasters. Although the exact cause is still debated, the fire was accidental. The initial timely response of the Chicago Fire Department would be slowed by a miscommunication on the part of the watchmen, and the understaffed fire department was already exhausted from a series of smaller fires over the days prior. Despite their efforts, the blaze grew rapidly and would cross the Chicago River for the first time around midnight. An unfortunately located gas plant would provide a significant source of fuel for this rapidly expanding fire. At 2:30 a.m., the city courthouse would collapse after being engulfed in flames. A few hours later, flaming debris would allow the fire to cross the river a second time in a different spot, also finding itself a tasty snack in the form of a railroad car full of kerosene. Why did the fire spread so fast? Well, the tinderbox environment with very dry vegetation and easily flammable structures certainly didn't help, but a meteorological phenomenon known as a fire whirl would also contribute. A fire whirl is defined by the U.S. Forest Service as a spinning vortex column of ascending hot air and gases, rising from a fire and carrying aloft smoke, debris, and flame. A fire whirl can be less than a foot in diameter or as large as 500 feet in diameter. These are similar to, but quite not the same as, a fire tornado or fire-nado. Basically, as the superheated air from a fire rises and comes in contact with cooler air, it forms a whirlwind that lifts flaming debris high off the ground and moves it at fast speeds. These dramatic images show exactly what fire whirls look like in action. You can see how the spinning vortex lifts burning debris high into the air, spreading the destruction faster and further than the fire could manage on its own, which made the Chicago fire nearly impossible to contain. In the Great Chicago Fire, this sent flaming debris into previously untouched areas, worsening the crisis. The city would be cooked when a piece of flaming timber struck the roof of Chicago's waterworks plant, engulfing the building in flames and ultimately destroying the building and the firefighting capability of the city at once. Ironically, the Chicago Water Tower you see here became one of the few structures to survive the fire, and it still stands today as a monument to that fateful night. The fire would eventually begin to burn itself out late in the evening that day. Relief in the form of a weather pattern change finally arrived that night with the arrival of a strong cold front associated with the low pressure system that had been traversing the plains. It brought a bit of rainfall, but more importantly, it lowered temperatures by as much as 30 degrees and weak winds. The fire would be fully extinguished the morning of October 10th. These photographs show the apocalyptic landscape left behind, mile after mile of rubble where a thriving city once stood. The devastation was so complete that many residents couldn't even locate where their homes had been. The final devastation would be the deaths of over 100 people, multiple square miles burned, and 90,000 residents left homeless and penniless. This fire would have a lasting legacy. One of the many donations that poured in from across the country would lead to the establishment of the Chicago Public Library. Its greatest legacy, though, was in something else entirely. In the aftermath of the fire, building codes were swiftly updated to ban the use of wood in downtown areas, replaced by stone, brick, limestone, and terracotta tiles. In the Chicago mayoral election just 1 month after the fire, the publisher of the Chicago Tribune, a candidate in that election, would win in a landslide of 73% of the vote by running on a platform of making the city fireproof through requiring that all new construction use these safer materials. Although cost-related opposition would initially limit those changes to the burn zone, a much smaller 1874 fire that destroyed many areas that had been rebuilt to those weaker standards emphasized the importance of those stricter fire codes. In that sense, the 1871 fire's legacy was ultimately secured with the wide application of those new building codes a few years later, codes that would become commonplace nationwide within decades. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to always be informed of my latest videos.